Good afternoon. I'm David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Editor for the Tennessean. We have the pleasure of having Councilman Fabian Bedne, who is a district councilman running for at-large Metro Councilman. We also have Maria DeVarine, the Executive Editor of the Tennessean. This is part of a public service that the Tennessean is doing to help voters get acquainted with mayoral and at-large Metro Council candidates in this election, which is on August 1st. This will be a conversation about a variety of things in the city, and we appreciate having you here, Councilman. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to be invited. I believe in engagement. This gives me an opportunity to get in front of people that perhaps haven't heard from me, so thanks.
Now, you've been a councilman for 8 years for your district. Tell us, why are you running for at-large?
So I got very excited about some of the things I did in my district, and I saw an opportunity, if I were to get elected at large, to have a bigger mandate to be able to tackle some of the city issues. When you get elected in a district, you get maybe 1,000, 1,500 votes. When you get elected citywide, you're doing it because the majority of the voters elected you. So that gives you a mandate to be able to go and say, you know, like I tried to fix affordable housing, and I was the one that pushed that issue at the end of the Dean administration. And I want to double my efforts to work on that and stop gentrification. Being at large, having that mandate allows me to go and speak with a stronger voice.
Thank you.
What makes you better qualified than your opponents?
I have very good papa jokes. My kids always tell me about it. My qualification is the fact that I have a unique background. So my background in architecture and having worked with many different entities allows me to understand what it takes to build a city. I'm the chair of planning, so the planning committee, so that also gives me an insight into that. But when you are an immigrant in a city and you have that unique point of view, automatically gives you an out-of-the-box view of things. So my legislations, my comments tend to be different than what other people propose. That doesn't mean that it's better, it just means that it's different. So it is an opportunity to see if there is another way of doing things. I don't buy into the narrative that you are for it against something. I always feel that there is always some other way to do it. And so I am relentless about it. So that's kind of my thing. I'm very much about failure is not an option. And if people are suffering, if people don't have housing, if people are not having access to services, we have to find a way to make it work.
Thank you.
Now, you represented District 31 these past 8 years, which is in southeastern Davidson County, and they have different issues perhaps than the downtown area do. How do you take that perspective from being a neighborhoods and suburban councilman into affecting and improving the rest of the county?
That's a great question, because it is true. I mean, my experience has been mostly dealing with suburban part of the city. Part of it is urban sprawl, part of it is a mixed-use development like Lenox Village, which is a very successful mixed-use development. So I tend to look at my view of the city is more regional. I'm closer to the mayor of Nolensville than the mayor of Nashville. I mean, I can drive to Nolensville much faster than I drive to, well, probably everybody has that experience with the traffic we have now. So I do have a more regional view of things. So when I'm looking at the issues that impact Nashville, I know about the issues downtown because I do some of my work here, but I also understand when people are saying, you know, where are my services? You know, where are my sidewalks? Where are my schools? I understand that because that's the people I represent. So I have a more holistic view of the city and how it works.
What would your top 2 or 3 priorities be?
Well, my main issue is dealing with this issue of rapid growth and how we're leaving people behind. That has been something that I have been kind of aiming to solve for many years. But I think that we're coming to a point where we are facing a tipping point. When people say that the city is changing, when people say, I don't recognize this place anymore, basically what they are saying is that I'm being pushed out. You know, this is not a city that has a place for me. And I think we need to find a way to make it work to where people are able to stay in the city that they help build. Everybody that has been here for a generation or two have been paying taxes for all that time to get us to where we are today. And now that we are in this very successful, very dynamic moment, they are not able to be part of that. So that's something that we have to find a way to solve. So, and that ties with the next thing, which is equity. I really think that equity in services and access to services is very important. It shouldn't matter how much money you make. It shouldn't matter who you know. It shouldn't matter where you live. Everybody should have equal access to be able to get the services they want. It shouldn't matter your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your religion, your background, your nationality. We all pay taxes. I mean, they say, what they say, death and taxes. I mean, and it's true. I mean, it doesn't matter. The moment you pay your rent, the moment you buy your groceries, you're paying taxes that support this city. So everybody should have the same level of access. So that's my other passion. So it's really solving the issue of displacement, gentrification, housing, and then the issue of equity to access to services.
Okay, thank you.
Now, having been the former chairman of the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee, you've had the chance to advance many initiatives, sometimes that were preempted by the state. What can Nashville do today, based upon the resources and the legal framework that we're in, to advance that conversation?
So the state preempted Nashville. I cannot prove it to you, but I think the state preempted us because local groups went to the state to us that they preempt Nashville. And that is a problem because when we work on the Ad Hoc committee, we really set out a very lengthy process. You were part of it there, and you saw that we tried to engage with all the stakeholders and make sure it was very inclusive. And then we arrived to a compromise. A compromise is when nobody's happy and everybody's happy because everybody got something that they were looking for. So once we arrived to a compromise, then some of the players decided to get around it and go to the state and ask for preemption. So that was a shock to me because I thought we were all coming to a place where we could agree on something. So I think the next step, unless the state changes, and there is some changes now with Speaker Casada, who was one of the instruments in the prevention of the housing legislation, him being out of the picture, hopefully there is an opportunity to do a reset. And that's what I'm aiming for, is to go back to the table and bring all the stakeholders again and see if we can come up with a compromise that now they will honor, you know, that they will help us go to the state and say, look, this preemption you did benefited my interest group, but it's hurting Nashville. So how can we actually, in an inclusive way, move the needle on things? Because hospitality, people can't find people to work on the restaurants. It's hard for people to teach. It's hard for people to work on the police. And there are all these problems because people are having a hard time staying on the city. So I think we have to find a way to work together. I sound like a slogan, I apologize. But I truly believe that this is not about the state. It's about our local groups going to a state and say, you know what, we want you to adjust your preemption. I mean, I'm not even going to dream that they will remove the preemption, but if they can at least adjust it to where they will allow us to do some type of inclusionary housing that will move the needle on housing, then that will be fantastic.
Can you talk a little bit more about Nashville's growth and what your viewpoint is, and if it is sustainable, how, and if you don't think it is, why so?
Well, I can tell you what I do in my district. For every change to anything that we do, I will call a meeting and I will inform people. Even if I'm passionate about something and I like it, I will always make sure people know about it because I put myself second. I want to know what the people are going to be impacted by something. How do they feel about it? And that informs my decision making. And then I can make better policy decisions. So I think the key to sustainability is to really engage with the community and have truly good opportunities for people to get involved and provide feedback. That's why I propose a participatory budgeting process. That's a resolution I just filed that will engage with the community to decide how we use public property. And so we will engage with the residents and we'll ask them, what would you like to see on this property? Mm-hmm. If they say, we don't want anything, we like it the way it is, it will stay the way it is. If they say, I want a daycare, I want some housing, I want a park, then it will allow us to, on the front end, decide how to do that. That's how you make it sustainable, because you're asking the people impacted by policy before you implement the policy. And we're always doing it backwards. Like on other issues, people always say, why don't you build an infrastructure before you do something, right? And they get frustrated because they're like, we get all excited, we do all these things, and then the infrastructure comes later and it takes years to put together. So turning around and putting people on the driving seat will make it to where we'll test it and we'll know, you know what, I hate the traffic, but I think I like this park here. So I'll accept the fact that I may get some traffic because I want to park better than having to be slowed down by traffic. They are the ones that are going to tell us what is sustainable. If I take this patronizing attitude that I know better than the people impacted by it, that may sound more expeditious, but it's really not a sustainable way to do it because you're just really designing a city for yourself instead of for the people that will use it.
Okay.
And related to this question, I wanted to talk to you about the recent property tax increase vote. You voted for it for the virtual budget, although it failed by one vote.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you vote for it? And when people talked to you, told your opinion, how did you explain it to them?
Again, I wrote this lengthy email to my constituents before voting it. I didn't get any pushback from people because I think people are mindful that some of the things they asked me to do require to be able to pay for it. In my district, we've been struggling. Everybody pays high insurance rates because there's not a fire station close by. And so I've been trying for 8 years to get a fire station. I finally was able to engage with a local developer who agreed to donate the land for the fire station and to prepare the site. That's a savings to the city close to $1 million, right? And so then I was able to get a commitment from Mayor Berry to build a station. But then what happened is when the funding wasn't there, we couldn't hire the firemen. So the city won't build a fire station if they cannot hire the firemen to staff the station. So here we are year after year waiting to get that fire station because we don't have the money to hire the people to staff it. So when I explain it that way to people, they understand. When they tell me that they are concerned about safety and we are short almost 200 police officers, they understand why we need the money. When they want to go to the park and they want to feel safe in the park and the park system doesn't have enough people to police those parks, they are concerned about it. When they want to see the roads fixed, when they want to see infrastructure taken care of. And I think people understand that there is, to build things, you can borrow, you can use bonds to do it. But to get things done, to hire people, that comes out of the revenue. And so I explained all that, and I think they were okay with it because they had been asking me to take care of all these problems for a long time. And the only way to do it is to have the people to make it happen. I think there was the biggest disconnect about the tax conversation is that people think we're a static city, right? That year after year after year, we have the same level of services, but that it's costing more money to run the services. The truth is, like if you build a new police station, that's a station that didn't exist before. And those are police officers that we didn't have before. If we build a new fire station, that's a building that wasn't there before, and firemen that were not there before. We build another school, we build another library. So we are doing the people's request of building infrastructure, but that requires to hire more people, and that costs more money. And that's the part that I think is lost on people, that we are not talking about maintaining the status quo. We are talking about improving the level of services and not having the money to pay for it. So I think once you explain it to people that way, they start to understand that it's not this narrative that is all related to waste. That just doesn't work because you ask for a new library, you ask for a new community center, you ask for all these services. So can do it with the same money.
Some people have said that the economic incentives that have been given to developers for certain projects would have been better spent, or the money could have been used for some of the funding that you've just discussed. Can you tell us your viewpoint about economic incentives?
Yeah. So I think that's another disconnect, because incentives are really not about making somebody rich. It's about job creation. That's really why we accept it, and that's why we set out the tool to do incentives. We don't have a state income tax, so we don't do tax credits. We rely on whatever we can do with property taxes to be able to move the needle on job creation. That's why I was a co-sponsor of the Do Better bill that ensures that we look at what type of jobs are being created, if they are local jobs, if they are good paying jobs, if they are permanent jobs instead of temporary jobs. And that's why I also sponsor the legislation that creates equity between incentives and housing. So the question here is not if we're going to incentives, is how. You know, the devil is on the details, right? And so if we know, you know, what these incentives are going to do, then we may say yes or we may say no. I just happened to not to vote for the Amazon incentive because I thought that there was a lack of infrastructure preparation for the number of people that were coming. But I tend to vote yes for incentives when they create good jobs because of this thing that happened to me 8 years ago. So I always go and talk to the neighbors before I run for office. I want to know what the issues are. So before I even start campaigning, I'll go around the city, the district, and I'll ask people for feedback. I've been doing that now that I run at large as well. I go to meetings and ask them what's important to you. So I'm knocking on doors on this one neighborhood in my district, which is one of the highest income neighborhoods. And this person comes out of the house and we're talking, and I'm like, so what can I do for you? And he starts crying. And this is a middle-aged person crying, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I'm going to lose my house. I'm being foreclosed. I need a job. And for me, that was really a clear mandate that we were at a crisis. That was a time where the Hickory Hollow Mall was going down. We had just lost the target. There was a real need to create an economy that will survive and that will keep Nashville going, that will create a baseline for jobs. And so I really believe that we actually did a good job with the incentives we did. The issue my frustration with those incentives were always the type of jobs that we were creating. And that's why I pushed for the Do Better bill, because I think having a baseline will help us when the next recession comes up, and it will keep Nashville sustainable for years. So that's what it is. I think I don't like it when they talk about incentives as, when we get emails from the chamber or somebody saying that we gotta support these businesses. I don't care about supporting the business. I want to make sure that we have good jobs for our Nashville residents. That's what it's all about for me.
You've talked a lot about displacement, and there's been a lot in the conversation about that. Recently, though, there have been conversations about displacement of small businesses. And wanted to get your take in terms of how do we address those needs? Oftentimes it's because of increases in rents that are not sustainable for the business owner. How might we be able to address that here in Nashville?
So, excuse me. So that's part of the problem with the tools we have right now to provide incentives for businesses is that by design, those tools can only be used for big projects. It's very hard to create an incentive for a very small business because it's cost prohibitive. It costs like about $250,000 to set up one of those TIF. So you can talk to Matt Wilshire at the Economic Development Office, and I've been driving him crazy for many years, asking him that we really spend more time supporting local businesses, mostly because most of the businesses in my district are mom and pop small stores, so I wanted to see them getting the services they needed. For many mom and pop stores, they don't even have time to go to a meeting because they are the ones running the business. So if they have to go to a meeting, they have to close the store to go to a meeting. So there are many things that we can do to help them that are not necessarily money. If we can help them with, somebody will help them with their taxes or with legal advice or marketing, there are different tools that can be used, but incentives for some parts of the city are important as well. That's why I set out to improve Nolensville Road. I had a meeting 8 years ago at the Design Center with other council members. We talked about trying to do something to improve the road, to support the local businesses. And so we had this idea that the first step will be to create an urban design overlay. So we went to the planning department. The planning department was understaffed. So I asked the council to support hiring another planning person. So we did. It took a long time. We finally hired the person, and the term was up. So then at the next term, I brought it up again, and we started talking about this urban design overlay. And it's taken now 8 years, but we finally passed the corridor design overlay for Nashville Road, which I think is the first step to bring investment to the road, because that road is a state road. So part of it is just create the infrastructure to be able to start creating investments. The other thing, and at the prior meeting I was talking about it, and Councilmember Mendez also brought it up, that there are ways to try to reset the conversation about incentives, so the cost of developing these incentives can be shared among different local businesses. I think, again, going back to sustainability, I think the key is, like, if we create a transit-oriented development, or if we create any instrument to revitalize a part of the community, that we make sure that the local residents are in the majority of making decisions about that institution. Right now, every time we create one, the majority tends to be bureaucrats, people from NDHA, people that are not really from that community, and that is not a good way to manage the growth on a community. If we want to make sure that a local business is not displaced, then let's make sure we get the majority of the people making decisions about that particular transit-oriented development, that particular instrument that is staffed in majority by local residents.
Thank you.
You touched on transportation a little bit in the beginning, but the residents did not approve a referendum in 2018, so they spoke out. At that point, what do you think should be done to resolve the transit and transportation issues that continue to get worse in Nashville? I applaud the effort to have a more inclusive leadership on making decisions about the transit. I think I attended a meeting, and I was a supporter of a kickoff of a local group that was talking about it. The more inclusive that group is, the more likely we are to come up with that solution that is sustainable, that represents what people want. I have a theory about why the referendum failed, and I think it had to do with a disconnect between a vision of the city that it was very pro-development about fixing our transit plan by building these transit-oriented developments very tightly close to the main corridors. And what we believe when we created the legislation at the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee is that we needed to look beyond the main corridor. We needed to look at how will that impact the homes and the residents that live a mile, 2 miles in from the corridors, and that whatever we did had to be more inclusive in preserving and keeping people from being gentrified and to helping people not to be displaced. So I think I suspect that probably that disconnect was one of the reasons why so many people that care a lot about housing decided not to support it, because they saw a model that wasn't inclusive enough. We were at the Planning Commission, we were talking about this Dickerson Road UDO plan just recently, and I brought that up. I said we need to have somebody from the Office of Economic Development to come and tell us how this great plan is going to impact local businesses. And we can't just see, one of the problems in Nashville is to have this silo mentality, right? So here we have the planning department creating an instrument to manage growth in a part of the city, but part of that should be more inclusive. We should say how the city mayor's office or the economic development office is going to create the tools to preserve and to prevent that instrument from impacting the people who have lived there for generations, and they ran their business and they've been fine. So people want growth, but not at every cost. They want to make sure that they are safe.
Very good. And we are nearing the end of our interview.
Really? I was having fun.
We're having fun too. But we wanted to ask you to tell the viewers why they should vote for you, and also how they might be able to contact you if they want to learn more about your campaign.
Well, thanks very much, and thank you to the people that are watching this. I need to hear from you. My number is 615-888-8255. 829-6226. That's my actual cell phone. And I want you to always call me, even if you don't vote for me. I need you to make sure that you tell me what your issues are, because part of the problem in Nashville is we are very southern, gentle people. We don't want to impose or bother other people. But unless we know what the problems are that you're facing in your neck of the woods, we cannot create policy to help you. My best way to get involved in my campaign is to go to bedneatlarge.com. Bedne is my last name, B-E-D-N-E, atlarge.com. There you can learn more about the campaign and see how you can get involved. And I need your help so we can move the needle in the city on making sure that it's a city for everybody. It shouldn't be us against them. We're on this together and we can make it work if we sit around the table and we can really hear from everybody and find a compromise. Right now, sometimes it's like, let's see who wins this thing, and without any concern about what happens to the other side. And that's not a good way to build a city. It has to be more inclusive, and that's what I want to do.
Thank you. We want to thank our guest, Councilman Fabian Bedne, who is running for at-large Metro Council member. Remember that the deadline to register to vote is July 2nd. Early voting starts on July 12th, and your final opportunity to vote is on the August 1st election. Remember, your vote is your voice. Thank you.